So I actually wrote this video out in order to help organize my thoughts a little bit, but here it is. One day I turned to my brother and said something I never thought I would say. I think nicotine withdrawal is a great way to become more present. Let me explain. Every time I start to get a feeling of low dopamine or withdrawal, I do breathing exercises to make it go away. And I've become super aware of my own thought process and noticing every time I start to have a craving. And then I cut that thought off and replace it with a mantra like, I'm happy to be free. Then we joked around with the idea of selling this as a meditation/mindfulness retreat. Now, a couple of months later, after successfully kicking my nicotine withdrawal, I found myself wondering if this approach could work for other things. I had recently made the switch from a meat and fruit heavy diet to more of a carnivore diet. I'm not really sure why I keep saying it that way, using more of, it's actually just a carnivore diet, but sugar cravings and withdrawals were kicking my butt. I often found myself giving in, eating some fruit late at night to try to make this low dopamine feeling go away. I was yeah. For people who have never tried carnivore, there's a period of time when you first start that you get really strong sugar cravings and you feel, and when you, okay. Yeah, you get really strong sugar cravings. And when you withhold the thing that you crave from yourself, it causes a feeling of lack to develop. This feeling then produces a low dopamine state, which further increases your craving for something like sugar, which could stimulate the release of dopamine. This is a vicious cycle which leads people to remark on how addicting sugar is. And for me, it wasn't even highly processed sugar. It was just fruit and a little bit of honey. Long story short, it worked. But this got me thinking about the science behind it. So the science behind it shows that replacing craving-driven thoughts with a mantra helps to rewire the neural pathways over time, weakening the association between the impulsive thought and the behavior of acting upon it. Second, the deep breathing serves two functions. It takes your focus off of the feeling withdrawal or lack and brings you into the present moment. Or said another way, it takes your focus from a thought in your head and brings it into your body. It also activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering cortisol and stress hormones that often drive impulsive behavior. So you can apply this to really whatever you want to. I found it extremely helpful for quitting nicotine, and I also found this helpful for recently with cutting out sugar. But it's basically whenever you have the thought of, I don't know, I want nicotine, I want a vape, I want to eat candy, or I want to eat a thing of chocolate, you just cut it off right away, and then you replace it with a thought of, I'm happy to be healthy, or just really anything. But you cut it off as quickly as you can so you don't even entertain it. And what this actually does is over time, you'll start cutting it off, like, you'll have a feeling of like, I want, and you just like cut it right there. And then sometimes it takes a little while to do this. Like a month or two later, you'll just have the random thought through your head of, I'm happy to be free. And you're like, yes, I've done it. Like you cut it off before you even started and then just said, I'm happy to be free. It takes some work, it takes some practice, but it is extremely effective and works for years. But the second part of this is the breathing. So there is, even though it's less than most people believe, there is chemical withdrawal from it, which can put you in a low dopamine state. And a while ago, I got thinking, well, happiness comes from within. So what does a low dopamine state mean? Well, that means that you can self-regulate your own dopamine levels, and that, I don't know, when you feel low dopamine and you start like feeling into that feeling, it's kind of like you're identifying with it, and you're like, I am low dopamine, which then just, it's hard to explain unless you've like, yeah, it's just hard to explain. But you basically, anyone you ask will basically say happiness comes from within, or at least any person that meditates a lot. And what that means is you can control whether or not you're happy. If you think happy thoughts, you will be happier. But when you're in a depressed state, you find it difficult to think happy thoughts. You find it difficult to regulate your own thoughts. So you're like, well, how do you decide to be happy? I mean, it is a decision. It is a decision that you make. But one of the steps to this is you can decide not to identify with the negative thoughts. And feeling lack is definitely one of those. Feeling lack will make you feel low dopamine because your brain doesn't like to feel lack. No one likes to feel like they're lacking in something. So if you start thinking, oh, it's like withholding something from yourself. If you ever take a kid and you take a toy away from them, they're gonna just start losing it. It's like you're still that kid on the inside. If you take something away from yourself, you start feeling this feeling of low dopamine. So in order to not identify with that feeling of low dopamine, bring yourself into the present moment, focusing on your breath, focusing on your breathing, which will take your attention from being up here in your head and put it like into your body where you can then keep it. And even though that's not necessarily creating happy thoughts, it's not furthering the negative thoughts. It's not identifying with the negative thoughts. It's not feeling the negative thoughts of lack. So you're kind of distracting yourself by becoming more present and more aware, and then combining these two things. And for this, it is something where like you'll have the thought or you'll have a feeling of being off, you'll do the breathing exercises, and then eventually at some point in time, you kind of just lose focus on the breathing exercises and you go off on another thought of something else, or you get caught up in your plans for the weekend. And then maybe half hour later, your thought will come back to, oh, I feel kind of low, I feel kind of down. And then you do this again. And if you ever try meditating, like try to focus on your breathing for like an hour. Your mind doesn't really do it. Like you'll focus on your breathing and then you'll get caught up in another thought. And I'm not even saying you don't even have to allow it to get caught up in another thought, but you can let it get caught up in those other thoughts, but you just need to regulate what those thoughts are. If they're a negative thought, then you can bring it back onto your breathing and then allow your thought to kind of go down another path. It's like when I don't know if everyone can do this, but for me, if I have a dream I don't like, I'll just make myself wake up and then I'll fall back to sleep and see what that dream is like. If I don't like it, I'll make myself wake up again and I'll just fall back asleep. So it's kind of like you're just restarting it. Like you still might go down and have the same thought of feeling of lack, but then you just restart again and then you see if you can go down a different path. And if you like where that path is going, you continue down it and you see where it goes. You see where the dream will take you. But if it starts taking a turn that you don't like, you bring your focus back onto your breath. And then by bringing it onto your breath, you'll eventually lose focus on your breath. You'll drift down another path. And you just repeat this process. You can repeat this process indefinitely. But through doing this, like, sugar craving is a lot easier to kick once you get into ketosis and you get adjusted to it. It's pretty easy. So, like, 4 days. Nicotine, 2 weeks. Like, but you just combine the two. It makes it a lot easier than it would be otherwise. And if you have any questions, comment those down below. And, yeah, let me know if you liked the video, if you liked this other format of it. It did take me a little bit longer to actually write everything out. Peace out.